Sacrifice was released in 1986 and was iconic Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky's last movie he ever made. He actually ended up passing away a couple months after he was done filming the movie. But the movie takes place in early to mid 20th century Sweden, and it's actually entirely in Swedish, which is kind of interesting, kind of in the way that Nostalgia was in a different language than Tarkovsky's original language, which the rest of his movies are in Russian. It's about a group of friends who hear the news very suddenly that there's basically going to be a nuclear war right around the time of like World War II happening. It's a fictional story, but it is about them dealing with the thought of there being nuclear war and how they're probably going to die very soon in a nuclear explosion. So much like the rest of Tarkovsky's movies, this movie does have to do a lot with kind of existential dread and about life itself, religion, and how you kind of handle your life. This one specifically is about how you look at your life by the end of it. And the lead character, Alexander, is played by Erland Josephson, who frequently worked with Ingmar Bergman, but was in this movie too, of course. His character is, throughout the movie, he struggles with not feeling like he ever did enough in his life, and that he wants to do more to help people. And it is a very introspective movie. It does feel like it's probably kind of autobiographical from Tarkovsky's perspective, because Tarkovsky knew he was dying when he was making this movie, and you can kind of see in a lot of aspects that this movie is kind of just about looking back on your life, like I said before. It would actually be a fairly good companion piece for Ingmar Bergman's Wild Strawberries, which is kind of in the similar vein, where it's about an older man looking back on his life. And of course there are similarities with it being Swedish and everything and all that. So it'd be kind of an interesting companion piece, because this movie actually does have a handful of connections to Bergman's work too. As Tarkovsky has showed throughout his career, his direction, and is very present in this movie especially, is very precise in what he's doing. I think that there was like something that said that there was like only 130 somewhat cuts in this movie, so there are a lot of just long shots throughout this movie. He does not have a knack for moving the camera unless it's just panning side to side, which is to his benefit and detriment at the same time, because this movie's biggest problem is that its second act does feel a little bit more prolonged than it should be. The concept of this movie, like I said before, is a group of people finding out that they're probably going to die soon and very suddenly. And while a handful of scenes do a really good job in kind of capturing that fear and that panic in that moment, it also kind of loses its own energy in some other moments, because the main character, Alexander especially, monologues throughout a lot of this movie. And while Erland does a great job in his role, he gives a really good performance in this movie, the character does start to feel a little boring throughout it. You are kind of hoping that there would be a little bit more of a frenetic energy to this kind of concept when there isn't. The second act is definitely, for me at least, the weakest part of this movie, because I really liked the first act, I really liked the third act. I liked the way it started and I liked the way it ended. The stuff in the middle I wasn't as big of a fan of. While it does have its moments, I don't think it's necessarily as strong as the way it started and ended, because it does at times feel like it is a little repetitive. This movie is 2.5 hours long, and it feels like it could be longer. You feel that length really badly in this movie. It's very slow. I like slow movies to an extent. I like art house movies to an extent. I am definitely saying that this movie was not necessarily my cup of tea in that, because I found it too slow, a little too pedantic. Tarkovsky himself is brilliant. I love his other movies, especially Stalker is my favorite movie of his. But there are aspects to this movie that I had a much harder time sitting through than I usually do with his movies. And that's just kind of my opinion, of course. I know that people regard this movie as a masterpiece, and I think I had my expectations a little too high because I've been waiting to watch this movie for a long time. And once you finally get around to it and it's not as good as you were expecting it to be, it is a bit of a letdown. I actually watched Nostalgia the day before, and I'd say that personally I prefer Nostalgia over The Sacrifice. I do think it's a solid movie for the most part. I think it's a good movie. I do think that it's really not going to be some people, a movie that a lot of people will want to watch, because it is slow and it is very art housey in its own right. But its concepts and its themes are very prevalent and palpable when you watch it. It's probably Tarkovsky's most religious movie, more religious than Andrei Rublev. And I do think it's a good movie. I really liked, like I said, certain aspects of it. The performances were really good, the direction was really good. Just the story itself was not nearly as entertaining as I was hoping it would be in comparison to some of his other movies. I recommend it if you're a fan of Tarkovsky and his style of filmmaking. If you're not into really slow art house movies, you're probably not going to like this movie. But I do think it's a solid, good movie, and I'm going to be rating The Sacrifice an 8.0 out of 10. Now, have you guys seen The Sacrifice? What did you think about it? What's your favorite Andrei Tarkovsky movie? Let me know, and I'll be back with another video.